believe a grandmother poisoned her daughter and 4 grandchildren in an alleged murder-suicide in upstate New York.
Very upsetting. Very upsetting. It's just having a little guy and knowing that there's 4 little babies that are no longer with us. It's very upsetting.
The police didn't know what they were walking into. A welfare check. That's all it was supposed to be. A neighbor had called because she hadn't seen the family in a while. No big deal, right? People get busy. People go on trips. But when officers pushed open that apartment door at the John S. Moore Homes complex on Harris Avenue in Mechanicville, New York, on the evening of June 24th, 2026, what they found inside wasn't a family that had gone on vacation. It was 6 bodies, a grandmother, a mother, and 4 children, the youngest just 10 years old. And the smell alone told investigators that these people had been dead for a very, very long time. Nobody screamed for help. Nobody called 911. Nobody made it out of that apartment alive. And here's what makes this case sit differently from every other tragedy you've heard about. Police believe the person who did this wasn't a stranger, wasn't a burglar, wasn't someone with a vendetta from the outside world. Investigators believe the killer was already inside that family. And she left a note. Before we go any further, I need you to take a second. If you believe that stories like this, about 4 children who never got to grow up, about a father who was 3 days away from seeing his kids for the first time in years, deserve to be told with the truth and the weight they carry, please like this video right now. Subscribe to Unearthed Crimes and hit that bell. These children had names. They had birthdays and favorite foods and arguments about whose turn it was on the TV. They deserve more than a headline. And this channel exists to make sure they get it. Now, let's talk about what really happened in Mechanicville. Amy Steadman was 64 years old. By all neighbor accounts, she was the kind of woman who was just always there, always present, always watching. Neighbors in the complex described her as friendly, warm, even the type of grandmother who sat outside and watched the kids play, who offered rides to people who needed to get somewhere, who you'd wave at every morning without thinking twice. One neighbor mentioned she was diabetic and wore a monitor on her arm. Another said she drove him to work sometimes. She was embedded in the rhythms of that housing complex in a way most people aren't. She wasn't invisible. She was woven in. But there was a reason Amy Steadman was so constantly present in her daughter's life. Her daughter, Sarah Myers, 44, and Sarah's 4 children, Harper, 13, Hudson, 11, and 10-year-old twins Gavin and Gracelynn. They were everything to Amy. And I mean everything in the most consuming, all-encompassing sense of the word. Neighbors said Sarah and Amy were inseparable, like best friends. That Amy was with Sarah every single day, without fail. What looks like devotion on the surface sometimes hides something far more complicated underneath. Sarah Myers had not had an easy life by any public measure. She and the father of her 4 children, Brady Harmon, had married in December 2015 in Salt Lake City, Utah. By November 2019, their marriage had collapsed. Brady formally filed for divorce in March 2020, and for the next 6 years, what followed was one of the most grueling custody battles you can imagine. Brady, who lived in Utah, claimed Sarah had been mentally, emotionally, and financially abusive toward him during their marriage. Sarah's side, at least in the public record, painted a different picture. Back in 2022, Amy Steadman herself shared a GoFundMe on Facebook for her daughter, titled, "Help Get a Domestic Violence Lawyer Save My Kids." She captioned it simply, "Please help my daughter and grandchildren." That fundraiser has since been deleted. Now, here's what we need to sit with for a moment, because this matters to understanding the psychology of what may have happened. Brady Harmon has denied any abuse. He says the divorce papers themselves, which list only irreconcilable differences as the grounds for divorce, contain no mention of domestic violence by either party. He says he was the one being abused, and he says that the real pattern here was Sarah using control as a weapon, keeping the children from him, refusing phone calls, moving and providing wrong addresses to the courts, interfering with every attempt he made to be a father. And whether or not you believe Brady Harmon fully, the courts eventually believed him enough. Because in April 2026, after 6.5 years of legal fighting, a Utah judge finalized the divorce and granted Brady 2 continuous months of custody with his children every summer, beginning in the summer of 2026. The children were due to fly to Utah to meet their father on July 1st. Brady had been counting down the days. He had a new family waiting to meet them. He'd never stopped fighting. The last time Brady spoke to his children was June 7th. He was supposed to speak to them again a few days later. He claims Sarah told him they were sick and wouldn't let them come to the phone. After that, silence. Brady started making calls. He requested welfare checks on June 13th, 16th, 17th, and 19th. Police responded and reportedly said they could hear sounds coming from inside the apartment, but no one answered the door. What those sounds were, we may never fully know. At the same time, back in Utah court, Brady had filed a motion on June 2nd accusing Sarah of violating the custody agreement, failing to provide medical and school records, giving a wrong address, blocking his contact with the kids. A hearing was scheduled. Possible penalties included jail time. That hearing will never take place, because on June 23rd, a neighbor requested one final welfare check. And this time, officers didn't hear sounds. They found bodies. Here's where you need to pay close attention, because this is where the psychology of this case becomes genuinely disturbing. When investigators searched Amy Steadman's apartment, the apartment where all 6 bodies were found, remember, not the one Sarah and the children actually lived in, they discovered something that began to answer the question everyone was asking. Prescription medications. Over-the-counter medications. A significant number of them. Evidence. Police said at a press conference, pointing to what they described as intentional poisoning. Not accidental. Intentional. Someone had used those medications deliberately, with knowledge of what they would do. And then there was the note. Police Chief William Rabbit confirmed that a handwritten note was recovered inside the apartment. He declined to read it publicly or describe its contents in detail, but what he said about it was chilling. The note, combined with other circumstantial evidence, strongly suggests that Amy Steadman was involved in the deaths of her daughter and all 4 grandchildren. Not accidentally, not peripherally, involved. One of the children also had what investigators called fatal sharp force injuries, a stab wound discovered during the autopsy conducted at Albany Medical Center. Police would not confirm which child. Let that land for a second. One of those 4 children, aged 10 to 13, died differently from the others. The toxicology results for the remaining victims are still pending. Now, here's what the police have been careful to say publicly, and I want to be equally careful with you. They have not ruled that this is definitively
the apartment
a murder
building next to me
suicide.
here is taped
They
off,
haven't
and you can see the
officially
building
announced
right
the
down the
manner
road
of
is
death
also
for
taped
anyone
off.
in that
A neighbor
apartment.
says the mother
What
lived
they've
in one
said
of the
is that
buildings
the
and the
evidence
grandmother lived in
strongly
the other.
suggests Amy
Earlier
was
this
involved,
morning, we saw
that
hazmat
no
crews on
outside
scene.
person
Police
appears to
got
have
to the
played
house
a
around
role,
6:30
and that
last
the
night.
full picture
State
won't
and local
emerge
police,
until
along with the sheriff's
toxicology
department,
and the
reached out to
medical
the sheriff's
examiner's final
department. They
report
say they
coming.
have no involvement in the
But the pattern
incident.
they're
A
describing,
neighbor last night
the
told
note,
CBS 6
the
she asked
medications,
police for
the
a
positioning
welfare
of the
check after
bodies,
not hearing from
the
the family
fact
for
that
2
everything
weeks
happened
and tell us
inside
children
Amy's
lived in the
apartment
home. We
points
spoke with
in
another
one
neighbor,
direction.
Amanda Gary,
Sources
who was
close to the
heartbroken by the
investigation
incident.
told local news that Amy Steadman had become deeply resentful after
The
Brady
Mechanicville
Harmon
City School
won
District said they're
custodial
aware
rights
of the
to the
incident,
children,
saying in a
that the
statement,
impending
there will be
trip to
counseling
Utah
available for
had
any
become
student who
something
feels they need to
she
talk
could
to
not
someone.
accept.
They'll continue
Brady
to monitor the
himself now
situation and
speculates
provide
that
services
Sarah
as needed.
may not have
We will share
acted
more
alone in
information
whatever
about the
happened,
family once
that
we get
this may have been
confirmation.
something that two women decided together. And while police have so far only named Amy as a suspect, that question, whether Sarah Myers was a participant or ultimately also a victim, is one investigators have not yet publicly answered. What we know is this: Sarah's relatives have spoken out asking people not to assume the worst about her. They describe her as a wonderful mother who was going through an incredibly painful time. Brady Harmon found out his children were dead the same week Father's Day was approaching. Police in Salt Lake City came to tell him in person he had been preparing to fly to New York on June 30th to finally pick them up. He had a custody agreement in his hand. He had a summer planned. He had people waiting to meet them. He told reporters, "I went from, I'm seeing my kids, to, I'll never see my kids again." And then he said something that will stay with me, all because they were going to spend 60 days with me. 60 days and 6.5 years. Brady also revealed that Mechanicville police had informed him that Saratoga County Child Protective Services had been called to that household multiple times before this happened. He didn't know the reasons. Sarah had never shared those records with him. Child Protective Services declined to comment publicly. We don't know what they found when they came or whether anything was flagged. That's a thread that investigators are almost certainly pulling right now. The community of Mechanicville has been shaken to its foundation. Flowers and balloons appeared outside the complex. Neighbors who waved at Amy every morning, who watched those children play outside, are trying to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with what police are now saying she did. One neighbor said Amy watched those children constantly, that they were only ever seen outside when she was with them. The children were homeschooled. They didn't go to the local school. Their entire world in many ways had been built around that housing complex, around their mother, around their grandmother. That kind of closeness can be love, but it can also be something that looks like love from the outside, while functioning like a cage from the inside. So now I want to ask you something directly, because this is the part of a case where easy answers don't exist, and I think you deserve the space to sit with that discomfort. If Amy Steadman truly planned this, if she deliberately poisoned her own grandchildren because she couldn't stomach them spending 2 months in Utah with their father, what does that tell us about how far a person can fall when love becomes ownership, when protection curdles into control? And what about Sarah? Was she a mother who was also ultimately failed by the person who said she loved her most? Or does the truth lie somewhere darker and more complicated than any of us are ready to accept right now? The investigation is ongoing. Toxicology results are coming. And when they do, I will be here. I want to know what you think happened in that apartment. Drop your theory in the comments right now. Do you believe Amy acted alone? You think Sarah knew? And do you think the system, the courts, the welfare checks, the CPS calls, had enough chances to prevent this? If this case moved you, if those 4 children and the father who never got his summer deserve more people knowing their names, please subscribe to Unearthed Crimes, like this video, and share it. We uncover the truth behind the world's darkest crimes, because somebody has to,